Every second Thursday of November, South Korea grounds 140 flights, silences construction sites across the country, and deploys 10,000 police officers to escort teenagers by motorcycle through empty streets. The stock exchange opens an hour late. Military drills stop. For 9 hours, 550,000 high school seniors sit a single exam that will determine which university accepts them, which company hires them, and statistically, who they marry. Outside the exam halls, their mothers pray at churches and temples, timing lunch to match the test schedule. And a few months after one of those mornings, the president of South Korea stepped to a lectern and declared a demographic national emergency. Because the country that shuts down its airspace for an exam has a fertility rate of 0.72, the lowest ever recorded for a country at peace. The Korean government has spent over 360 trillion won, roughly $270 billion, on programs designed to get people to have children. That is not too far from the annual GDP of Finland. Births kept falling. I want to walk through what that money bought, and then I want to show you the machine that made the spending irrelevant, a machine the Korean state itself built piece by piece starting in 1961. This is a story of how a government engineered one of the greatest economic miracles of the 20th century and how the same engineering is now subtracting the country from the future. The spending failed because the variable that actually drives Korean fertility was installed 60 years ago and no one in power can afford to touch it. So what did $270 billion actually buy? Seoul's mayor launched a 6.7 trillion won birth support project. New parents receive a 2 million won lump sum called the First Encounter voucher, then 1 million won every month for 12 months, totaling 29.6 million won in benefits per child born in 2024. Fathers get 20 days of paid paternity leave. The city of Seongnam runs municipal blind dating events under the brand name Solomon's Choice. Last spring in Daegu, 100 singles attended a state-sponsored party complete with dinner, champagne, love-themed bingo, and an exercise where participants gaze into each other's eyes. The 2025 fertility budget hit 19.7 trillion won, about 13.76 billion, a 22% increase year on year. And marriages did jump 14.9% in 2024. The fertility rate ticked up. Korean officials called it a turning point. Demographers were less confident. Sejung Lim of SUNY Buffalo told CNN that the honest answer is the post-COVID marriage backlog clearing. Even after the bump, Seoul's birth rate was 0.58. The population is still projected to shrink to 36.22 million by 2072, and on current rates may half by 2100. For perspective, Ukraine, a country currently being shelled by Russia, has a higher birth rate than Korea. A Korean woman named Cha Ji-hye, asked why she wouldn't have a second child, answered with a question of her own: what family can spend that kind of money to raise children? The Yuhua Population Research Institute calculates that Korea ranks highest in the world for the cost of raising a child. The number is roughly $275,000 to age 18, or 7.8 times the country's GDP per capita. In the US, by comparison, it's 4.1 times. And about a third of that Korean cost goes to a single industry. In a Daechidong study cafe in 2022, a Seoul mother posted an ad seeking someone to sit beside her son and wake him up if he fell asleep. She offered roughly $2.50 an hour. Her son was preparing for the Sunung, that same 9-hour exam that grounds the airplanes. The neighborhood she lived in, a few blocks of southern Gangnam, contains over 950 Hagwons, for-profit cram schools where Korean children spend their evenings. Real estate prices in Daechidong run at 300% of comparable areas in Seoul. Parents pay to live near the tutors. The journalist Seo Woon-koo, who taught in one for a year, described the buildings of the New York Times as soulless facilities with room after room divided by thin walls lit by long fluorescent bulbs. The students, he wrote, were serious about studying, but their eyes appeared dead. He estimated that the average South Korean student works up to 13 hours a day, while the average high school student sleeps only 5.5 hours a night. Boarding Hagwon schedules run from 6 a.m. to midnight. Some duchy facilities now provide screaming pods for frustrated teenagers to let off steam. Korea has been trying to slow this for 30 years. Hagwons in Seoul must close at 10 p.m. The Municipal Office of Education employs citizens called Hagparazzi, freelance snoops who visit Hagwons with hidden cameras and collect a share of any fines imposed on schools they bust. One of them, a woman named Jennifer Chung, was profiled working the buildings with a high-definition camcorder hidden in her purse, the lens peeking through a tiny hole. Hagwons evade her by blacking out windows so light can't be seen from outside, or when raids feel imminent, by switching off the lights and continuing lessons in the dark, or by loading students onto a bus and driving away. In 2023, Korean parents spent a total of 26 trillion won, almost $20 billion, on private education, about 2% of GDP. Of children aged 5, 81.2% were enrolled in some kind of paid lesson. So were 26.4% of children aged 2 and younger. Yes, 2 years old and younger. The top tutors make pop star money. A math instructor named Cha Kil-young earned $8 million in 2024. He commutes in a chauffeured Mercedes and dressed up for cameras like a K-pop singer. He told the Washington Post, "You're not only teaching a subject, you also have to be a multi-talented entertainer." The education minister has called the wider sector the private education cartels. A 2024 paper in the American Economic Review built a model where parents care about their children's relative academic standing, not absolute academic standing. In that world, every family's investment raises the bar for every other family. Their finding, fertility would be 28% higher without this externality. Their proposed remedy was a 22% education tax combined with pro-natal transfers. One of the authors told Brookings that if you propose taxing education in a room full of economists, you pretty much get burned at the stake. Each individual decision is rational. The aggregate is a country with no grandchildren. The BBC reports that fewer of 2% of Korean students will reach a SKY institution, Seoul National, Korea University, and Yonsei. Attending one is one of the best ways into a job at the family-run conglomerates known as chaebol. The four largest of those, Samsung, SK, Hyundai, and LG, generated combined sales of 980.5 trillion won in 2023, accounting for 40.8% of the country's nominal GDP. Time described it like this: these companies hire almost exclusively from the country's top 3 universities, and for most of South Korea's brightest students, it's chaebol or bust. In 2014, Samsung's entrance exam, yes, Samsung itself has an exam, was taken by 200,000 people competing for 14,000 jobs. Daniel Tudor, the former Economist correspondent in Seoul, wrote in his book that the possibility of a truly self-made Korean Bill Gates was little more than zero. Jeffrey Kane made the same point in Samsung Rising. I'm paraphrasing: Korea has no college dropout Steve Jobs, no dorm room Zuckerberg. The architecture has one door, and this architecture was deliberate. In May 1961, an army general named Park Chung-hee took power in a coup in a country poorer than Ghana. One of the first moves was to curtail the 5.8 children per woman they saw as excessive and an obstacle to growth. The slogans evolved decade by decade. In the 60s, have 3 children 3 years apart, stop at 35. By the 70s, daughter or son, don't distinguish, have 2 only and raise them well. By the 80s, even 2 is a lot. In 1974, child tax exemptions were limited to 3 children. In 1977, limited to 2. By 1983, the government suspended maternal health insurance for women carrying a 3rd child. In 1984, 502,000 South Koreans were sterilized. Those who agreed received priority placement in public housing and better government loans. Simultaneously, the developmental state was pouring capital into Samsung, Hyundai, and LG and tightening the entrance examination organizations that fed them. The fertility rate fell from 6 to 1.6 by 1988, a 74% drop in 28 years. The historian Matthew Connolly called the larger population campaign, of which Korea's was a cell, the most ambitious social engineering project of the 20th century. The reduction in births produced a demographic dividend, a temporary bulge of working-age adults with few dependents. That bulge funded the Korean miracle. Per capita income climbed from a few $100s in 1961 to $35,000 today. The Seoul you can see from a hotel window in Gangnam was paid for, in part, by women in rural villages submitting to IUDs administered by physicians trained on American grants. By 1989, the state quietly stopped giving out free contraceptives. By 2006, it was paying women to have children. The same machinery that pressed 40 million people through one legitimacy track then turned around and discovered, with apparent surprise, that the population it had taught to optimize within a single track had stopped reproducing. Around 2010, on a Korean message board, a term started circulating: Hell Joseon. The Joseon dynasty had been Korea's last hereditary monarchy, governed by a 5-century class hierarchy. The joke was that 21st century South Korea was the same machine wearing modern clothing. A young man told the Korea Times there is no hope in Korea. A 2019 survey found that 75% of Koreans aged 19 to 34 wanted to leave the country. The vocabulary expanded. The Sompo generation gave up on 3 things: dating, marriage, and child rearing. The Opo generation added homeownership and personal relationships. The Chilpo added hope and career. And finally, the Wonpo Sede, the total giving up generation, added life itself. A parallel framework, spoon class theory, sorted citizens by birth. A gold spoon was the child of a chaebol heir. A dirt spoon was a child of a service worker. The dirt spoon kid was told to study harder. By his late 20s, after 20 years of cram schools, that graduate found 11.3% youth unemployment in entry-level chaebol jobs paid in passion pay, an arrangement where interns are supposed to be passionate enough to put up with poor treatment. Now imagine you are a 34-year-old Seoul woman in 2026. The average Seoul apartment costs about 18 times the average annual income. You are deciding whether to have a second child. You know the state will give you 2 million won at birth and $1 million a month for a year. You know your husband gets 20 days. You also know that within 5 years, your child will be sitting in Hagwon classrooms, and the first grade roster is not optional because every other mother on your floor has signed up for it. Your existing child is already in 3 Hagwons, consuming roughly 10% of your household's disposable income. A second child cuts that per child investment in half. You know what that does to a Sunung score. You know what a Sunung score does to a life. You do the math. The math comes out negative. $1,500 in 20 days of paternity leave. Do not flip the sign. Cho Eun-ju of Jeonbuk National University put it like this: people don't get married or become pregnant because the government tells them to. To actually fix this, Korea would have to cap private tutoring expenditures, something like the 22% education tax from the American Economic Review paper. It would have to break up the chaebol monopsony on prestige labor. It would have to diversify legitimacy so that a Korean life can be complete without entering through one of the 3 university gates. Each of these is politically lethal. Each of these touches a constituency that benefits from the current architecture: the Hagwon industry, the chaebol, the Sky alumni networks, and last but not least, the parents who already paid the price and want to be paid back for their child's success. The state, composed of people from those constituencies, cannot dismantle these things without dismembering itself. So it sends a check and hopes for the best. Korea is often filed by foreign observers as exotic, as if the grounded airplanes and the Dutchy-dong screaming pods are cultural curiosities that could never travel. They do travel. China is roughly 1 decade behind on the same trajectory and accelerating. Japan got there softer because Japan never consolidated its sorting hierarchy as cleanly. Singapore is on it. Taiwan is on it. The American version is more diffuse but not absent. The credentialism that runs from elite preschools through Ivy admissions, through finance, through housing and school district zones is the same machine, less consolidated with a larger continental escape valve. The Korean experiment is useful precisely because it is the cleanest case. The state ran the variables to their limit. It got the dividend, then the wealth, then the global cultural soft power. And then the bill came due. The bill is that the next generation, having calculated what the system asks of them, has chosen, in the aggregate, not to produce a generation after itself. This November, when the airplanes go silent over Seoul for 35 minutes, that silence is the country saluting its own design. I cover stories like this regularly, the systems and incentives that shape economies and populations in ways that most people never notice. If you want these breakdowns in your inbox, join the newsletter, link is in the description. And if this video helped you see something differently, subscribe. I'll see you in the next one.